Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Welcome back to the show. We are honored to have Dr. Grant Venerable joining us again here live on today's show, and excited that he is our podcast professional of the year. Always excited that he's here to share so many different stories. And first and foremost, how are you today, Grant? How's the weather in California?
Well, I'm fine.
Good.
It's nice up here. It's about 80 degrees on the desert, the upper desert, and so it's looking like a good day. But the fall is coming, which means the days are getting cooler and cooler.
Did you have any family time, fun time this weekend? What do someone like you do on the weekends, Grant?
Well, I catch up. I have so much email to process in the week, and I just hope it slows down on weekends. So I do that. I read articles that come through on email as well as on my streams.
Great.
There's been some interesting news out there, and I attempt to process it as well as I can through my chemist's and artist's brain.
Great.
To make sense of it all. So this morning I woke up processing the paradoxical relationship between unity and division. And these I've spoken of before as being part of the double shadow that inhabits all human beings. And that really much of what we think is different is really not different. It's a different flavor of the same thing.
Yeah.
And I wanted to put out some thoughts that come from experiences I've had. One is right now we're in a temporary period, I believe, of a return to equilibrium between political elements who think that they're different from each other, but are really alike, but they choose different forms. I went to an event at Grace Episcopal Cathedral back in the 1980s when I lived in the San Francisco Bay Area, and that's one of the major Protestant pulpits of the United States. And it had a guest speaker at this particular service from a gentleman named Reverend Gardner Taylor of New York. And Taylor made a very humorous reflection before he started speaking on his topic. And the reflection is, see if I get this right, because it's a little, he was a titan, literally, of the Methodist pulpit. So he was this invited speaker, and he talked about, he says, well, you know, Baptists are Christians who wash, and Methodists are simply Baptists who got a grade school education. However, Presbyterians are Methodists who went to college. And then finally, Episcopalians are Presbyterians whose investments in the stock market worked out. And so that's how Gardner Taylor set the reality that I want to deal with. So I made that as a paraphrase to get further. I want to throw this out as a challenge to our listeners, our audience, that in a way we can say that conservatives are liberals. Well, let me start with liberals. Liberals are actually conservatives in the political chaos of today. And it follows from what Gardner Taylor just talked about. But liberals are actually conservatives who are despairing pessimists about the future. And conservatives are liberals who
Mm-hmm.
hope to assist the rich and powerful to impose their will on the poor and weak. Now, that sounds like a very
Mm-hmm.
interesting statement.
Yeah.
They're kind of like upside down and right side up, but it's really saying there is no real political division in the country. Everybody's the same, and they have different ways of getting at whatever it is they want out of life. And I started last time to really talk about how people address that in many ways, namely that I talked about labels. And labels really, I think, are the element that are keeping who people think are liberals and people who think are conservatives, to keep them apart. But it's really they're talking the same thing in all different kinds of labels, and assume that everyone uses the same labels in the same way with the same understandings. And the result is that isn't true. I mentioned about clothing labels. What would people who depend upon clothing labels do without labels? Because they're relying on something external to themselves to identify their deep selves, their inner selves. And of course, those are very much apart.
Mm-hmm.
So you buy the clothes that have the right label, the right sound to it, and the right fashion shows around that label, no matter what kind of clothing it is. And clothing is talked about a lot in all of the generations, and everyone wants the right fashion to represent who they are. You've heard the word meme, M-E-M-E.
Yes.
And it's used a lot these days. That there's certain memes that represent what people, how they present themselves, what it is they aspire to. And I want to get to certain kinds of labels. And that's where we left off before. And the labels that maybe are some of the most interesting and confusing have to do with a little word that people call race.
Yeah.
And get very mixed up about it. And then they have acronyms as substitutes for race. We have this clever little acronym called DEI, which really came from the descendants of the African-American slaves. Another little word is WOKE, woke. And it is one of the most, it's confusing to me, because when I hear political people on the right talk about it, they're really borrowing an instrument, a symbolism that were used by the slaves and the ex-slaves. And it symbolized their strength, their creativity, their harmony in correcting the circumstances that occurred to them during that long period. I don't even call it a dark period, but I said it was a period.
Yeah.
And what happened. So now this is like the age of recrimination and blame. But the former slave folk, their descendants, did not use woke that way. So we're all on the same page. There's an old spiritual that was sung by the people who were praying for their freedom. And then once they got their freedom in 1863, it was still theoretical. It was pronounced by Abraham Lincoln, and the Civil War was going on, and they were still owned and employed. I'll put employed in quotes. They had duties to perform for their owners. So they sang this song as I woke up this morning with my mind Set on freedom. And that song went all the way through the Reconstruction period, which didn't really work. And it led to the rise of the Ku Klux Klan to actually re-enslave them. And the fortunate ones were able to actually wake up. And it referred to, I woke up this morning with my mind set on freedom, but they were really talking about the Lord helping them to freedom. And I said, that's beautiful. I didn't learn about that until I was in graduate school. It was during this period called the Black Power era, which that's the late 1960s. I was in graduate school. The most interesting people came along then. It was kind of at the tail end of the civil rights era, which I mentioned a week ago, that was one of the inspirational periods for me. And I was in Chicago at that time. So the thing about race is that there's two ways to address it. One is, I think, psychologically, and the other is genetically. And that there's only one race, and it is the human race. But that human race came from hundreds of different geographies. And each geography was a little genetic inlet where the ancestors of various people came from all over the world. And they looked very different, but they all were the same in one important way, that their phenotypes, their appearances were all unified. And we could make lists forever, like all human beings have heads, cranial cases, they have eyes, they have noses, they have lips, they have ears, they have brains, they have lungs, they have torsos, they have all of the equipment they need to be human. But we give credit to the anthropologists like Johann Blumenbach, Friedrich Blumenbach, way back in the 1700s, who cataloged these characteristics, and it helped the Europeans who were sailing out in the 1600s and discovering there were all kinds of different looking people, but they were still all the same people. And as I mentioned, the only use they had for race was to refer to people from different citizenships in different countries. So if you're from Singapore, then you were of the Singaporean race, and if you're from Beijing, then you're from the Asian Indian races, and so forth. But we give credit, or should I say blame maybe, to Blumenbach, et cetera, and the others for putting the races on the totem pole and saying, well, some are superior to others. And they used kind of a phony kind of anatomy to do that. And part of that anatomy was the color of the skin. It was a course I taught at San Francisco State in the 1990s. And even then, there was limited knowledge of melanin. Now, melanin should be the chemical that everyone says hallelujah for, because paradoxically, while it shows differences in colors in the skin, it proves the unity of people of all skin colors.
No.
Proving that skin color cannot be the basis for race, except as a universal, that we all have it. But not the fact that we have different skin colors, because we're supposed to have different skin colors. Some people like to say, oh, well, God made us different, so we have to accept it, and some are better than others. But the darkest skin colors were there to protect people from the ultraviolet rays of the sun. And where did the darkest people come from? In general, wherever that was, from Indo-Asia all the way into sub-Saharan Africa, it's because they lived in rainforests at that time. And what's true of a rainforest is there's hardly a darker environment on Earth in broad daylight, just because the leaves, the plants are so thick, and it doesn't let much sunlight through, except the sunlight that comes through does have infrared. I mean, it does have infrared, but it also has ultraviolet rays in it. And if you get too much ultraviolet, it can lead to melanoma, which is called skin cancer, which is one of the deadliest, quickest cancers to form in the human being. And that's why people have to be careful with staying in the sun too long, and they tan. But why do they tan? It's because if people had come from Europe and their skin is always light, and once their ancestors had very dark skin, what caused that? Adaptations in nature. There were albino youngsters, babies that were born to these darker skinned people who had migrated up from the African continent. And the ones that the only group that's kept its coloration, its original color, are present day Eskimos and others who lived up in Northern Europe. But they had one redeeming factor called vitamin D, which they got not from sunlight hitting the skin and creating vitamin D in the epidermal layer of the skin. They got it by eating fish.
Got it. Yeah.
It was the staple of their diets. So the Eskimos didn't need to adapt by changing their color, as it were. But the other Europeans did. And those that had formed about 12,000 to the last 6,000 years, because they're a very recent form of Homo sapiens. Prior to that, all of the Homo primates were brown to very dark complexioned. So that's one of the little surprises that awaits people who take a course on melanin, because melanin is a very clever molecule, and its formation starts where the brain is going to develop in the young fetus, and both the organ for creating melanocytes, they're created very close to the organ that creates the brain. Now, we don't fully understand the consequences of that. I know there's some people who've claimed that, well, it means that skin color, darker skin colors means it's more intelligent people because it's close to the brain. And that's kind of a mirror image of what Blumenbach was claiming, the reverse of. But neither one is true. What's true is that while the melanocytes did start in the brain, they are able to, another substance had to develop through mutation so that people did not forever stay dark-skinned, because up in Europe, they didn't need dark skin because it would keep out the UV that would create vitamin D. So another substance was created that people should say hallelujah for, and it's called glutathione. There's 38 isomers of glutathione. That means they have the same chemical formula, but they have different chemical structures. And there's just a couple of structures that do a very important thing.
Yeah.
When a person who's naturally darker skinned, who lives in the far northern climes of like Europe, they don't need that darker skin at certain times. They need to suppress that. So sun tanning is a process of producing darker skin. And
Yep.
it's regulated by this other thing called glutathione.
Mm-hmm.
So then as the sun gets darker, I mean, the sun gets brighter, and then it's time for the skin to tan. Then the glutathione tells the melanin, the melanocytes, cool it, no more melanin today.
Yep.
We need to get the skin lighter.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how that came about. Now there might be some questions on the air on the switchboard that come in. So
we are waiting. Yeah, the lines are open 631-307-4010 and again 631-307-4010. And we don't have any calls yet, but come on in, bring it on, give us a call, ask any question. Nothing off topic. I mean, anything off topic, anything you'd like to ask Dr. Grant would be wonderful. So keep it open, 631-307-4010.
So we're now in this thing about labels.
Yep.
And the labels have a good use,
Yep.
but we can't abuse them. They have to be put to the right use.
Mm-hmm.
Like a good use is, I'm a professional. I'm a retired professor. I'm a retired university vice president. Those are nice labels to have, but I don't parade them around like that's the most important thing about me. So they're not really like permanent identifications. And then there's other kinds of labels depending on, oh, are you a surfer? What kind of environment do you live in?
Yeah.
Do you live in Oregon? Which means you have a label of, I'm an Oregonian. So what does that mean? I mean, there is such a thing as you mentioned in the East Coast. Well, I'm from California. This has actually happened. I think people do that either jokingly, but sometimes less than jokingly. Oh, you're from California. Oh, those, whatever they are, that live out there. And then you're out west with the Washingtonian and you say, oh, I'm from Mississippi. Oh, my goodness, Mississippi. How could you be from Mississippi?
Right.
But these are the dynamics of labels that we have to watch.
Mm-hmm.
Labels are words, they're memes,
Yeah.
hopefully to help us live our lives better, not in dualizing antagonisms toward others. So, does anything occur to you, Jill? I just really put out a lot from.
It is a lot, but I love it because we do have a call. Hi, welcome to the show. You are live on the line with Dr. Venerable. Who's this? Hello, hello. Hello, you are live on the line. Try us back, 631-307-4010. We are here waiting for your call. All right, hopefully they'll call back. In the meantime, I know talking about color, race, ethnicity, it's so amazing though about our skin, how we talk about that. It's true, right? How we've endured,
Right.
Where we live, it's fascinating. But this whole concept of race, and I just, I was born white, right? And I grew up in a household, I just want to say that, where I had an old school Italian grandfather who was very prejudiced, very discriminatory against anyone not of his own Italian ancestry and ethnicity, right? And I grew up, it's funny now, but then my father was a little bit like that too, right? Not so bad. But then now here I am in this generation. I have two little boys, 8 and 10. And my biggest thing is to love, to welcome, to accept all. We do not, hello? Anyone there? Hello, hello? To love people, and the color of the skin means absolutely nothing. And I'm just hope this whole prejudice about race, about ethnicity, about what color skin we have ends soon. I feel like it's so much better, but it's still not done. It's still out there. And, and I speak from being white, you speak from being, black. So my question to you is, do you see it getting better in your lifetime? Do you see a lot of, has it gotten better?
I'm going to say yes, uncompromisingly yes,
Good.
but I'm also not blocked to seeing
Yeah.
where the changes have occurred.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed that in when I first lived in San Luis Obispo. That's the Spanish pronunciation for Saint Louis the Bishop, who was a well-known bishop in Spain during the 1700s. And this town where the California Polytechnic State University is located, called Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo, that's where I taught, starting in 1972. The county of San Luis Obispo had the reputation, humorously or not, for being the whitest county in California, at least major county, 200,000 people. And I lived there for several years. One of my uncles, two of my mother's brothers, who lived over toward the San Joaquin Valley, had dropped in to see me at various times. And their first visit to me, I had a house in the country about 12 miles from the Cal Poly campus on over an acre of land. It was beautiful with the mountains behind me. And they would say, they'd walk in the door and say, why are you living way out in a place like this?
Yeah.
And I said, well, look who's talking. Because one uncle lived in Tulare and had moved there in the 1920s, and it was way out in the country, and he had a farm out there. And then the other uncle lived halfway between Fresno and Yosemite National Park in a place called Coarse Gold, very rural area. Something hit me that it was a family trait.
Ooh.
Because these areas that we had lived in had a low percentage of people of African heritage and a much higher percentage of people of European heritage. But it never touched us in terms of that. But it did a lot of other people who were teaching at Cal Poly as my colleagues, who were not ever quite comfortable living with such a dearth of people who had their skin color within certain limits and looked like them. That's the words that were used. And so they didn't stay long. Yeah. And they would move on toward a more urban area where they had more people that looked like them. And I asked myself the question, well, why am I so comfortable here?
Yeah.
But others are not.
Yeah.
And that's when I began exploring and began to write my memoir called Footprints in the Chaotic Unknown.
Tell us.
I have lived in chaotic unknowns all my life. My ancestors lived in chaotic unknowns. And there's ways that you live in chaos. And I don't think anyone does not live in chaos. They're just different qualities of chaos. But if they're more familiar with the chaos, it may lend a better chance at survival. And I realized, number two, I enjoy people of different heritages, being around them, living as neighbors of them. And there were people that enjoyed me and people that looked like me. And I remember having one of my high school classmates who visited me in Georgia when I worked there. And I actually hired him to move to Atlanta and teach at the same college where I was teaching. And of course, that was a big shift from Southern California to North Georgia. And even though Atlanta is a diverse place, the city is about 3/4 Black. But what does Black mean, actually? It doesn't mean literally black skin, like just total darkness. It just is a name that developed over time people coming from certain cultural universals in terms of language, what kind of food they ate, what kind of entertainments they had, what their philosophies were. And this couple, they were named James and Gigi. They got so lonely for California at times. Gigi would wake up like on a Sunday morning and say, Jim, I want to go look at some white people today. Can we go to lunch in Buckhead?
Aw.
So that's what they would do.
Yeah.
But they meant that literally, sincerely, that they got used to looking at mainly their darker complexion poor people, and they said, "Oh, we need to look at." They also wanted to see some Asian people, and some
of course.
Latino
We're curious
people,
about,
because that's what we were used to in California.
Wow. Well, hold on, guys. The number 631-307-4010. We are waiting for you to call back. Whoever called before, please give us a buzz. 631. You got that? 307-4010. Thank you so much. And, Grant Venerable, I mean, all with his background is here, going over, gosh, you are the second or the third Grant? Wait, you're technically Grant the third. Is that true?
I'm the third Grant, but the second Grant Delbert.
Got it.
And the first Grant was named Beverly Grant, born in 1867, somewhere back there. And my dad was named Grant Venerable. And by the 1900 teens, when he was still a teenager, he was 12 years old, he thought he had heard of another Grant Venerable. So he wanted a middle name and went to the library to choose a middle name.
Aww.
And he saw and chose Delbert, Delbert. And so he became Grant D. Venerable. And then my parents, since my dad used Grant, they had me use Delbert, which I did use until my third year teaching at Cal Poly, because there's a psychology behind that. When I discovered, and this is really an African cultural vestige to think the way I was thinking, namely, parents would name their children, they'd give them a good day of the week name until they spent a year or two to figure out a permanent first two names. If the name they give them didn't quite work, in other words, the child's behavior was not what they wanted, so that they would pick a name that was more reflective of the behavior they wanted.
Got it.
And so that's why naming is so important in African history.
Beautiful.
Well, for me, my middle name that I was going by, I discovered, was connected to I'll just use the word soft. We hear that, a soft masculinity. It's in a way I don't quite necessarily favor it, because all men should be soft in their mental and emotional spaces in the right ways at the right times. And we get away from these terminologies that don't mean a thing to me, like toxic masculinity, toxic femininity. And I just, come on, you're a man, you're a woman, and you develop in terms of who you are, what your talents are. And I know there's still a lot to be learned on that front, because we've known for many centuries that people are not all people are born with definitively differing sex organs.
Yeah.
And people have to learn, just educate themselves about that.
Hello.
Hey.
Hi, you are live on the line with Grant Venerable. That's Dr. Grant Venerable, now Professional of the Year. Who's calling?
Hey, this is Kenneth. I just had a few questions for Grant. How's it going, guys?
Oh, fine.
So, Basically, well, hey, Grant, you're really inspirational, and I feel like you've lived through so much. So, what words of like inspiration do you have for like the younger generation looking to get into your field of work?
Wow.
Yeah.
What was the question, Jill? To get into my field of work?
Yeah. What field of work in particular, sweetheart? Repeat that.
Yeah, like what words of inspiration or what type of like advice maybe for any individuals looking to get into like your type of field?
Words of inspiration. Someone looking to get in your type of field. Yeah.
I understand that. And in fact, I was thinking this morning, I was talking to a friend whose parents did not expect him to go to college. So he didn't really plan to go to college, but he did. And he went to Cal Poly just because it had animal science. And he wound up in my chemistry class many years ago. But the difference between us, and I think probably what drew him to me, is that I had always planned to go to college from the first day I could think a thought. And there's a reason for that. And I was raised in a family with college-educated adults.
Yeah.
Starting with my father, my dad, whom I adored, and he went to one of the best colleges in California. So I said, well, I want to go to Caltech too. And there's a story there. There's a story behind everything I talk about. But I didn't get to go to Caltech, but I held on to that desire to go to college. And my dad didn't even say, you have to go to college, son. But he put out the atmosphere in the house that drew his children to want to go to college. So there was no requirement, but we knew we wanted to go to college. Now, what I took at college, I think, is what Ken, I think your name is, what you're asking about. Look at what you're interested in right now and try to major in that, what you think you're interested in, whatever it is. And I got interested early in chemistry. I used to do experiments on the linoleum tabletop in our kitchen, which was a new kind of material to build tables out of in the late 40s. One day I did an experiment on it in which I put some magnesium metal shavings in a beaker of water just to see what would happen. Well, I knew kind of what would happen. Those are magnesium metals, very reactive. You put that in water, and it starts pulling electrons out of the water molecules so fast that it kind of erupts in flame. And that's what happened. It's like a little volcano on the tabletop, and sparks flew all over the table. Well, I'm only saying that to say is that stimulated my interest in chemistry to predict what would happen if I put 2 or 3 substances together. But the other part of the equation is once I got to college, go to a college that offers good general education curriculum. The general ed, as we call it, is almost as important or more important than your major, because at the end of your course of study, a good general curriculum where you take electives in other areas like philosophy or foreign language or physical education or biology helps you to put together the parts of the whole of life, the whole of living in a modern world. And I think my general education was so good that it stimulated my brain to reach out, even after I left college, when I went into the adult world, of just gorging myself on knowledge that was far afield from what I was interested in at the beginning. Even though at the beginning it was all astronomy, it was chemistry, it was the biology of the human body and things like that. And then be around classmates who have broad interests in other fields. And I remember in my senior year at UCLA, I was hanging out with physicists who lived on my same floor in the dormitory, Hedrick Hall. And they were in the fields of physics and astronomy, and then there were other areas as well. So does that help?
Of course. I feel like, so I appreciate you guys today. I'm glad I called in. So I got a lot to think on. I appreciate you again, Grant. You guys enjoy your day,
You're
all right?
welcome.
Thank you so much. Can't they have a
Thank
great
you.
day? Very
Thank
sweet.
you.
All right, 631-307-4010. Anyone else wants to call in? We still got 13 minutes left in the show. What else are we on a roll with today? Anything in particular? Grant, you there?
Oh, yes.
Perfect. I was going to say anything else. What else did you want to cover for today?
Well, I was reflecting on one of your
Yes.
points of genius is what you asked the last time. It was just a last minute question. What was the most inspiring period in your life of so many years? And I hadn't really reflected on that particular question. And I kept thinking about it even after I gave the answers that I did get. But I could go further, and that were in later life. Well, Silicon Valley is one of those periods in the 1980s, in the between 1981 and 86, somewhere in there. And that's where I was able to develop different skills of my mind, even though I had never been trained in a single computer course in my existence. But I was hired by a man who was vice president for software applications. That was about 1983, early 83. And he said, I really need someone who thinks like you, because I think it would help our very specialized computer engineers and computer scientists. And so he hired me as an educator, a computer educator. And the company sent me to take classes in some of the software applications that had to be used to design and manufacture their computer products. And one of those was Oracle. I can say that just because everyone's familiar with Oracle Corporation, which it was a pretty good sized company then, but now it's just humongous. It's one of the biggest in the world. And I was trained on the Oracle database. And I had no background in that except chemistry. But I learned it enough to come back and teach a course in how to use the Oracle database inside of the computer systems that my company was developing. And that was a very exciting period. It continued my education into more specialized technical topics. And that company, it was called Four Phase Systems, which was later bought out by Motorola. But across the street was Apple Computer, the original Apple headquarters. It's still there. And Steve Jobs lived over there, so to speak. And then there were other companies close by. This was in Cupertino, California. And everyone thought in such exciting ways in that industry. The intellectual environment was very like the best intellectual environments in universities, including Stanford, which was within a few miles of all of those companies. So I have just Stanford stories galore in terms of Silicon Valley and how people think. So the companies look for people who think in certain ways. And my job was to think in ways that would help the marketing people who are not technical people to understand what the technical people are doing and what their computers can really do. Mm-hmm. That is, so they could sell the computers. But my other job was to convert the knowledge of the computer software and hardware into language that the upper management would understand. And then so the upper management could communicate back to the technical people what they wanted to see in the products.
Yeah.
So, and then the marketing people had this assignment to also keep in touch with customers. What is it that the customers want to see in a product? How should it work? What I found later is that ethos lost tracking in those companies because the customer became a shrill hope.
Yeah.
They got disinterested in what the customers thought or wanted, even after the customer bought the product. But there's hope.
Aww.
I think you asked me if there's hope. Are things changing?
Love it.
Touching on the race issue again.
Yeah.
It's changing more than the news media is allowing the public to know.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're in human situations, whether you're up in around Portland, Maine, or down near Baja, California, there's massive changes taking place. And you see it in the smallest seeming human ways of people communicating with people, even if they don't know each other, but especially if they don't know each other. And I found that here in this Yucca Valley area.
Beautiful.
That is such a conglomeration of people who immigrated from hundreds of different countries around the world.
Yeah. Well, fascinating, Grant. And, one thing, is there anything in life that you have yet to accomplish that's on your bucket list?
I need to write the book on race.
That's, yes.
I've already written it while I was at San Francisco State, but I didn't have opportunity to pull it together, the whole thing together to publish it. So I'm hoping to see that in print in a very few years, as well as traveling more to Europe, Asia, and Africa, Central America.
Wow.
Travel is the next best thing to education.
Beautiful.
Because it is so educational.
Yep.
I was talking to this friend yesterday about that, who was in the Peace Corps, who really learned economics through the agricultural side of economics, which is where economics came from. We wouldn't have economics today if we hadn't had to eat food and grow food. But that just came along for the ride.
Love it.
As we developed as civilized people.
Well, thank you so much, guys. The lines are open, 631-307-4010. If you do have any questions still for our Grant in our last 4 minutes of the show, how did you want to leave off with everyone?
Well, I kind of tapped this thing on my computer. Come on here. Okay. You can see me again?
You're there.
Okay. All right. I think more about the gifts that were available to me from my parents and their families. I think of that more and more. And when I get a chance and I'm around young children of friends and see the way their parents are raising them, I tell them that. I said, you kids are so lucky to have your parents. Even when you get upset with them, you're still lucky to have them.
So true, right?
How they are raising you to be as free to express yourself as possible. And when they feel that it's a little beyond the boundaries they want to see, they try to rein that in, but they do that out of love so that you don't say the wrong thing in the wrong place. But that's one of the big things that parents are for.
My goodness. Well, that's what I love, as a parent, trying to teach my kids so much. I always want that next generation to do better, to succeed better, to, right? It's like, there's so much in this beautiful thing called life that I just love that we're here. We're able to talk. We're able to communicate. Guys, you're here listening today or watching, and we're just be thankful, be grateful. You got to change your mindset. It's never too late, right? Live your best life ever. And that's what we're doing with Dr. Grant Venerable. How do we contact you, darling?
Probably, I have a new email address to give you because the old one is phasing out. The new one is venmatrix@outlook.com. VENMATRIX @outlook.com. The web address is still the same at Grant Venerable PhD, all lowercase.com.
Well, thank you for today, and thank you to Kenneth for calling in. Looking forward to the next time we get to connect, okay? Thanks so much.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Adopt US Kids presents Multiple Choice Parenting.
Your daughter just had her first breakup. Do you A, put yourself in her shoes?
How could he do this to you? And for Sheila, she has split ends.
B, console her?
Oh, sweetie, this is going to happen a lot. 4, maybe 5 more times before you get married.
C, take charge?
Got to get this all straightened out. Give a little talking to, man to man, mano a mano. Hey, Steve! Is now a good time? No? Okay, no problem. Bye.
Or D, help her find a new boyfriend?
I know a great place to meet boys. The internet. Nice, single boys. Never mind. How about some ice cream?
As a parent, there are no perfect answers. But you don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same.
For more information on how you can adopt, visit adoptuskids.org. A public service announcement from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.